I don't know about you, but I don't like adversity. And yet, adversity, difficulty, problems are a part of life in this world. And we learn a great many things by dealing with adversity. That's our topic today. It's a wonderful day. Maybe rainy outside, but the building is full with friends and with family and people that love God. As has been mentioned by a couple of people already, we're really glad to have Minnie Mormon with us, a very, very dear friend, a godly woman, and someone who is a good person just in the community as well. So we're really glad to be worshiping with her. She mentioned she wanted to be able to come on Wednesday night, and we have plenty of seats on Wednesday night, and we're starting new classes in another week. So we're just thrilled for that. And Ronnie's going to be teaching Ecclesiastes a week from Wednesday. And Keith's going to be teaching the Gospel of John on Sunday morning. So I think it'll be great for all of us. As I look around today, I'm also just very thankful for our guests that are here with us. I ran into David Sims at Chick fil A the other day, and I was sitting with some 90-year-old approximately men, and he asked me if I was there every day. I said, no, I'm there occasionally, just often enough to keep in touch with him. But great to see him here. It's wonderful to have Adam and Hannah and Charlotte here with us. Really, really encouraging to see them. And as I told before, I just hope that Charlotte makes a little noise sometime during service because we're just glad to have some babies here. But we appreciate every one of you. I look out and I notice Nathan Simpson is here today. Nathan has moved to Alabama and things are going well. He's got a job, he's going to school. I don't know if he's got a girlfriend or not, but he's meeting a lot of them while he's there. So we're really glad to see Nathan. And if you want to ask him about his girlfriends, you feel just free to do so as long as his mom's not around. But we're glad to have every one of you here today, and good to have Madison's friend as well. As we look at what's ahead in our lesson, there are major trials that are faced by biblical figures, and there are also major trials that have been faced by you if you've lived very long in this earth. They're going to show us how to overcome temptation and what to do in the midst of moral dilemmas, and we all can use that. They also confronted adversity and enemies, and as you go through life, you will face some of those as well. And finally, we're going to talk about spiritual growth through these challenges. As you look at the trials of biblical figures, this is a different lesson than when I had on endurance 3 or 4 weeks ago, but it's some of the same characters that endured and also went through trials. Abraham had probably one of the greatest trials that any human being has ever had. He was given great promises in Genesis chapter 12 by God. They would become a great nation. They would receive the land of Canaan, and that in them all nations of the earth would be blessed. Well, God fulfilled these promises. He has a child that's born. And then God says, go to one of the mountains of Moriah, thought to be Temple Mount itself, that he was told to go and offer his son, his only son, Isaac, the son of promise. Can't even imagine being asked to do that. But God in his wisdom put him to this test. And it's interesting, God did not ask Abraham to do anything he was not willing to do. God gave his son, we know as Jesus Christ. So God gave his son. He called upon Abraham to be willing to give his son. God gave up his son. He died on the cross. Abraham was saved by the angel of God who did not allow him to sacrifice his son, but God received him in a figure. Abraham was willing to obey God, even when he didn't understand, even when it seemed like the most difficult thing that he possibly could have imagined. As you can imagine how he would go home and tell his wife, Sarah, that her only child, the child of her old age, the child of promise, had been sacrificed by him. But he withstood all of that, and God in his providence saved him. So as I start thinking about people that overcome adversity, I've had a little adversity in life. You may have had a lot. But God has shown us the way out of adversity. Abraham had faith in God, and God led him through the challenge. and led him through the difficulty, and he came out faithfully on the other side. Another great person who faced adversity at several places in life was Moses. Moses confronted Pharaoh's servant and stood up for a Hebrew who was being beaten and mistreated severely. He ended up killing the Egyptian, going into basically exile for 40 years, a significant portion of his life. He was so comfortable there. He was married. He had children. And yet God said, leave this land. You're going to go back to Egypt. You're going to go before Pharaoh. And you can imagine how he dreaded going back and seeing possibly a brother, possibly some other one who was now Pharaoh. He went, and in going back to Egypt, he ended up obeying God. He participated in the Passover and believed God would save them when the Egyptian firstborn were killed. He led the children of Israel across the Red Sea when there was an army behind them and sure death it seemed. He led them for 40 years in the wilderness and took the cares and the pains of all the people upon himself. He received the covenant at Mount Sinai, and many people rejected it before he even got off the mountain. And yet God gave him the covenant again. And we see that he was preserved through his life by faith in Almighty God. Surely, when we have adversity in our life, we can look to Moses. It wasn't easy, but it sure was significant. It changed the world because it changed him and the promises of Almighty God. Job is the most known in the Bible of those who suffered affliction. He lost it all. None of us like loss. We don't lose a fire because it destroys possessions. We don't like death because we lose those that we've been loved to or in love with in this world. We don't like any of the things associated with the challenges of being made fun of like Adam was, or being rejected by friends. And yet Job lost his wealth. He lost his health. He lost his family. He went through a terrible physical suffering and without a clear cause. Didn't understand why he had boils all over his body and he was in pain day and night. But he maintained faith in God. He sought meaning and he refused to curse God even when he didn't understand. You know, I don't understand why Mike Johnson has been what he's been through over the last 3 weeks. Mike Johnson has been in terrible shape, and all I've ever known from Mike Johnson in my life is he's a good man and he's done good things. He does so many things for us here. And yet, he's on the mend apparently now at the moment in time. But God's love for him was even in the midst of the worst of his illness. And God's love for you and for your family is in the midst of your trials and your circumstances. We don't like it. We don't necessarily understand it. But life in this world has challenges, has adversity. But there's a sure home for heaven, in heaven with God, when this life is over. God allowed him to ask questions. God showed him the answer as his word was revealed to Job. And Job was successful. He had his fortune restored. His faith became stronger. And he was an example to those in his generation and all of those now who went through the challenges of life and succeeded in faithfulness to God. As we look at overcoming temptation and trials, sometimes people face terrible moral dilemmas, none more so than Joseph. Joseph was sold by his brothers into Egyptian slavery. Can you imagine your own physical brothers selling you to slave people? Unthinkable. In that area, he excelled. He worked hard. And he became head of his master's household. And yet, the master's wife wanted him to lie with her, to engage in immorality. And he refused. He said, how can I sin against God and do this great wickedness? And he would not sin against his master. What'd that get him? Sometimes you do the right thing and all you get, what he got, is the coat left in his hand, false accusations, and he ends up being in prison for 2 years. But God didn't forget about him during those 2 years. God used him. And out of that adversity came a strong, determined, faithful child of God who ended up saving his people in Egypt. Sometimes we look at our life as like it's isolated. It's not. God sees the large picture. God sees all the good that's accomplished, though at the given moment in time, we may not see that. Joseph could not have possibly understood all that was happening to him, why he was betrayed by his brother, why he ended up in jail, why he ended up working for all those years, and then having his brothers come before him with the opportunity to get even if he wanted to, and he chose not. Joseph saved his people from starvation by the help and might of God, helped them become a great nation, and they arose from that nation going into a land being prepared for the future with the Messiah. Joseph is a great example of resisting evil. Doing the right thing isn't always rewarded short term, but it's always rewarded by Almighty God. And that's true for young or old alike. You ever thought what would happen if you were falsely accused of something? I think the main thing that would matter was actually had you done it. Were you someone who had sought to do what's God? If you're falsely accused, like Joseph was, then your faith and trust must rest in God.